I just did, Ermis, when you're done, as we get to that last thing. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ermis, the president of the user group, to go ahead and talk about what's going on.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, it looks like we have a very good attendance today. My screen shows we have 25 people participating today, so it's great news. So it's already May, and today's presentation is open road alignment and right of way, and it's presented by Tim Wright from Bentley. And we said sorry
about that. Since the next stuff is on there, I just thought we'll just pop in and you can mention people and what we got to do. Sorry.
Yeah. Our officers and user advisors, I'm not going to go over that. That's basically, we are still looking additional people who want to get involved as advisors and for future officers. So anybody who is interested can shoot an email, me or Mark or Kathy or Roberto, and we'll looking additional people to get involved. And with that, Mark, let's go to next slide. Like I said, today's meeting is presentation is presented by Tim Wright, and we have a officer meeting coming up in June 12th, and July 8th we have another presentation, also open road updates overview. And I don't know yet who is going to be presenting that, but I think we're going to be working with let's see, Ryan, to get a name. Mark, unless you have a name already.
No, yeah, well, that one was supposed to be the topic for this one, and it got changed because now that we're a public company, we have to watch what we're talking about, and update 1 hadn't released yet, so we switched it to July. So it could be Tim, it could be someone else. So we'll get somebody from that group. Yeah.
Okay. And also, we are still in a planning phase for our Bentley Bash in November. So also input from all the members and anybody who has any topics, we are listening and still in a planning phase for our Bentley Bash. It's going to be virtual as of now. And with that, I will turn over to Tim Wright from Bentley System. Tim, can you hear us?
Well, actually, let me give that one last announcement I just mentioned just before jumping on, just so that everybody's aware, and then I'll turn it over to Tim. Thank you very much, Ermis. Yeah, something that just came out recently. There was an announcement that you might have gotten, but Bentley is supercharging our outreach to the academic world. And there's if you go to education.bentley.com, this is the website, and they now have unplugged a lot of the resources so that students can actually download all of the different applications, get to the training materials and videos. A lot of good content for students on here as well, talking about it, and then there's talking about other programs. So they have all the different solutions and popular products that are out here, including some others. So those are things. So if you're aware of education, or if you're involved in schools, it's a good way to provide that. Roberto, I know that you've done a lot in Tucson, and it might be good to spread the word on that down in Tucson.
Sure.
Because before you could get, the Pima County had the subscription, if you will, to make it available. And Ermis, as we were talking about wanting to plan the bash, it might be interesting to we could bring this up to the different colleges that we want to use our campuses and say, hey, Bentley's willing to give you all the software you want to do. Just let us use your campus, and I think it might be a good on-ramp for that. So we'll see.
That's the way we bribe.
It's a bribe, but they don't need to know that everybody could actually get it, right? Any questions before I stop sharing and Tim takes over?
For a minute,
What?
Mark, can I talk for a minute?
You may talk for a minute. Yes.
I just wanted to mention that we're also looking for additional officers in Tucson.
Oh, yes.
Yes. It's hard with just two of us.
Yep. So I don't know. Yeah, but we should probably make a bigger announcement, a bigger group.
Yeah.
The email blast.
Yeah, we just recently found out that we lost a lot of people at SRP. A couple got married, several are not there anymore, and a whole bunch of them retired. So we lost 15 or so from the SRP group.
So that's why they disappeared when the email went out. I was preoccupied, but I saw you guys had it covered. So thank you for jumping all over that stuff. I mean, before I got a chance to respond, people had responded. So.
Joe, we contacted Joe over there, and he managed to track down the names that came back as rejects. So.
Okay. All right. I saw Jeff Schlesinger's on the call.
Yes, he is.
I'm here.
Yep, he's here. So glad we got people connected anyway, got the word out. Lots of good stuff going on. Yeah, Jeff, we were talking about our issue at the bash, and part of the problem was we've had the pandemic going on, so we haven't been able to meet in person.
Right.
But we're still looking at doing something. With that, let's go ahead and turn it over to Tim. We'll give you the floor. If you want to share your screen.
All right. Well, let me know when you can see my screen.
We see your screen, and I'll turn my camera off so I don't
all right.
take up any extra bandwidth. And if I disappear, I've been having some internet problems. So you got it.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for inviting me. As you can see, I've already got the product started up and running. Today, we're going to talk about right-of-way parcels, right? So this training comes from one of our bundled applications, but I'm just going to use it as a framework. I think there's plenty to talk about here as we get field questions and get started. So without further ado, what I'm going to do is one of the first things you notice with the new geometry tools is they can be kind of clunky with doing right-of-ways and stuff like that, right? When we talk about how that information is conveyed, a lot of times you have a legal description or something like that. So what we're going to start with is a tool that I like to show, and that's the Geometry Builder. And I'm going to go ahead and kick that off. Now, when that first opens up here, you can see there's not a lot going on in the dialog. Have not been activated yet. And what we need to do is just tell it we're going to make a new thing. So I just click this little button here, and now you see the dialog kind of comes alive, right? And feature definitions, if you aren't aware, really drive the software. I cannot stress that enough, how much feature definitions matter. So one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to set up my feature definition here. And we've got one defined for property lines. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. And then I can go ahead and give this element a new name. Now this is going to be parcel 8 here. So I'm just going to type that in. And now I'm actually ready to get started here. Now what this tool does is allows us to enter information. A lot of times the way we're used to like reading it off the papers, right, or the legal description. You can see it's kind of row by row based here with a bearing and a distance. But before I do that, there is one thing that I want to toggle on, and that's this button right here. And that tells me that I'm going to create civilly ruled objects. And what that means is basically intelligent lines, right? The lines themselves will know what bearing and distance they are. And it's part of the new concept of the way we talk about these objects now. And I'm just going to throw some numbers in here. And you can see that I can just use a space bar. That's kind of nice. I don't have to worry about that caret or any of the other ways that we used to enter in things. And just to hit an enter, and it'll take me to the next field there. So you can see I can very quickly enter this data in just by using the space bar and the enter key. Oop. Get the numbers right, that's going to help. So as I work through this, feel free to type up any questions that you have, or even if you want to unmute your mic real quick and just give a shout out. Like I said, we're going to have a lot of questions, I think, as we work through this, and those are always good, right? Everybody gets to learn something. So I'm just going to finish wrapping this up and bring it home. So north 61 here, 16, 56 west, and 1074.69. Now, on this last line here, I always like to hit the enter key, but you'll see what it did then is made another element that just goes due north, at a 0 distance. So I'm just going to go ahead and select that last line and delete it. Okay, just nice and tidy. So now, before we place this out here, let's talk about some of the things that we see. First of all, you saw how quick and easy it was to enter that information. We actually come down here, and you've got a space where you can decide how the software kind of interrogates the element. So right here where it says begin point, if I left click on that, you'll see that little black drop down arrow. I can say this is not closed, and when it's not closed, that has the software looking at it more as like an alignment. So you can see what I get basically as a readout is simply the length of that object, okay? Now, if I do tell it, hey, this has got a begin point, it treats it more like a parcel. So there you can see I've got a perimeter, I've got an area including acreage, or everybody likes to see their acreage, right? And a closure. So you can see that we've got a good closure report. So the way the software interrogates this element gives you clues right up front. You can kind of glance down there and say, oh, look, I must have fat fingered one of the numbers because I'm not closing correctly. So you could go back then and check your data. Another nice thing about this dialog is we can save kind of the object in an XML format. Now, unfortunately, this isn't land XML. Okay, I do have an enhancement request in to make it a land XML format, but currently it's just kind of a proprietary. But all I need to do is come up here and say save this file, and that's going to bring it out here, and I can say, this is parcel 8. And what that'll let me do is later on I can bring that parcel back up and make changes on it if I need to. Okay.
So Tim, if you have an ARC, are you going to talk about that?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So if you want to put an ARC in there, you just change the type here. And when you change something into an ARC, you can define the 2 different ways that you can bring in an ARC, right? First of all, maybe I have the ARC length, and maybe I've got the, the tangent or something like that. You've got different options in here that you can actually tell it as you create that ARC. The different options there. And it will also do degrees of curve. You can put that in there with the D space and then the degree of curve there. Okay. Any questions? Now, let me illustrate something that's kind of confusing. If you go through this training on your own by yourself, the software or the training manual does something kind of wonky. All right, that's a technical term. And what it means is it's something that you would never really do in real life. So what the training material has you do is come out here and pick a beginning point, and we just throw it out in space. Now, like I said, that's not something that you would typically do, right? You'd have your point of beginning there, and when you threw in your bearings and distances and all that, those would be real live numbers. But the manual here, the courseware, actually puts things off to the side so that we can use a new tool, and I'll show you that here in a second. So while I agree with the training material, you know, as an academic thing to show you a new tool, in real life, this isn't how we put right away down, right? So just that's my disclaimer. I got some pretty interesting feedback the first time I demoed this training environment. So I picked my point of beginning there, and like I said, the way I did that was just an arbitrary, I clicked the little crosshair here, I picked an arbitrary point and just threw it out there. You could also key in that value or snap on the point of beginning. And as we wrap this up, hopefully we'll have enough time, I can come back and show you, you know, how we would do this in real life. But now that I've got that all set up, you'll see nothing has really been placed yet. It's kind of in a temporary place right now, and nothing really happens until I hit this place button over here. And now that element actually gets written to the file. Okay, before that it was kind of just a temporary graphic there. So now as I come in and hover over this, you can see that it's a complex element. Its name is parcel 8, right? So that matches the name we gave it here. And if I left click on it, you can see how that element retains that information. So there's my north 61 1656. You can see that represented there. So now I can go ahead and get rid of this, and I'll go ahead and update my XML file there. Now, like I said, this is something that you wouldn't normally do in real life, but we're going to move this and rotate it. Now, where do we need to rotate it to? Where is our point of beginning? Well, if we look at our legal description there, what it says is from the beginning, or from this monument point here, we're going to go a set distance down the alignment. Okay, so that's like a delta station offset, right? We don't have a station called out. What we have is a distance from a point. And a lot of people look at Open Roads Designer and they're like, where's this Kogo tool that I used to use? You know, I want to use this tool because that's how I did my stuff. Well, a lot of times now things are kind of layered. And one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to pick a place point tool, okay, which allows you to place a cell out there basically. And then we're going to layer it with Civil AccuDraw here. So I've got Civil AccuDraw up. Where that came from is this little like wind mine icon here, little spiky ball there. I just select that and I toggle it on and off. Now, I always tell everybody that Civil AccuDraw is either your best friend or your worst enemy. If you understand it, it's a great tool, right? You can see in this mode, we can do a station or a distance and direction. We can do them unlinked. We can do a distance, right? We can key in a true XY coordinate, something you can't do with regular AccuDraw because it's always working off of a delta. You can still do a delta, but this is where it gets interesting. Now we have a station and offset, and even a delta station offset. And that's the setting that we're going to use here. We're going to use a delta station offset. Now, the way we set this up is we've got the point tool going here, and we have several different modes for elevation. I'll just show you these real quick. You can plug in a value, you can pull it off the terrain model, or you can set it by another element. We're not going to worry about that, and we're not going to do rotation either. But I do want to show you that it can be placed relative to an alignment. So if you've got your stop signs or your power poles, something that, you know, typically you'd rotate kind of in line with your roadway, you can plug that in as well. So we're going to come up here and we're going to set this as a property corner. Again, this is the feature definition. The feature definition drives what cell gets placed, what levels they get put on, colors, all that good stuff, right? And it also does quite a bit in the background as well. And what we're going to call this is PO point of beginning for parcel 8. Once I've got that all, and you know, you'd probably fill this out too, right? That's close enough. Oh, I did miss a G there. All right, so now that we've got that set up, now we need to actually place the point, right? And this is where people either love or hate Civil AccuDraw. You'll see as I move my cursor over there, it's telling me what the delta station is and what the offset is. Okay, and you'll see nothing's working, right? And you're like, mashing this button, trying to figure out, well, what's going on? This tool sucks. I'm going to get rid of it, right? What's going on is we haven't set the ordinate element yet. Now, the ordinate element is another name for the element that we're going to reference, or in this case, our alignment, right? So what I always tell everybody, this is your life lesson for today, right? It's all about the big O. And what I mean by that is you'll see there's an offset field there. So I'm going to hit the tab button on my keyboard, and that brings it to the offset field. Okay, again, big O. And I'm going to hit O on my keyboard. And what that does is it sets it up to say, okay, well, what is your ordinate element or your reference element? And you can see it gives me a little prompt there to say, hey, select your element or reset to keep the currently selected one. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to left click on my alignment here and select it. And then because we picked a delta station offset, it says select your reference point. Okay. Now, if you'll remember, I said the reference point was going to be at the beginning of my alignment or at this monument point. So I'm just going to let the software snap to that point. Okay, you can see that Accu snap down there helping me out, that little yellow X, and I left click to accept it. Now, one thing that I always like to do when I'm doing this is I'm just going to snap to that first station mark there, and I'm going to look at my delta station. And sure enough, we're right there at 100 foot. Okay, so that means that we're good to go. Now, I do need to caution you about one little gotcha here. Okay. If you're one of those people that have set up a pan drag, okay, as a keyboard shortcut or a mouse thing or something, if I move with a pan drag, that has upset where my monument point is. See my delta station there? Okay, I've already filed a ticket on this. They know about it, but I need to make you aware of that if you do a delta, it doesn't affect station offset or I don't think any of these others. It's only on the delta's offset that using the pan drag there can get you into trouble. So be aware of that. So I'm just going to go ahead and set that point up again. So everything's good to go. And again, spot check it. There we go at 100 foot. Okay. So I've got my point tool all set up. I've got Civil AccuDraw helping me out. Now I can enter that information. So the delta value that I want is 2647.19. And I hit enter, and that will lock that in. And then when I bump my mouse, it might be hard to see on the screen there, but you can see that little X is locked in at that station point now. And now all I need to do is set the offset to 0 because I want that cell placed right on my alignment. Okay, so now that both of those are locked in, I simply do a left click, and there it is. So now if I zoom into that point there, you can see that cell up here. If I hover over it, it tells me what it is. It's point of beginning for parcel 8. Now, this is another thing that kind of confuses people. When I select that cell, it remembers how it was placed, right? It was placed at a 0 offset and this distance from the beginning. Now, if you look at that, that looks like a chord distance, doesn't it? But that's just because they cut a few corners when they were doing the graphic for this and they didn't trace that alignment. Okay, I guess they figured that would be a, little horsepower overhead or something. So this is a true distance along the element. It just kind of looks like it's a chord distance. Okay, so don't get confused about that. It's actually drawn correctly. Okay, so now we've got our point of beginning. Like I said, the training material here kind of works a little backwards, right? Usually you'd set your point of beginning and then you'd draw your parcel based off of that. But then I wouldn't be able to show you this cool tool called the transform tool. Okay, now that was located up here in the upper right-hand corner. And the transform tool is really useful if you want to pick these smart elements up and move them. Because they have rules associated with them, you can't just come up here and pick your move tool and grab that element. You'll see you get the little no-go sign, right? That's because these elements have rules. So you have to use a special tool to do that, and that's the transform. Now, what's nice about this is it allows you to go ahead and do your move or your rotate or your scale, and whether or not that appears in the Z elevation. So each one of these toggle on or toggle on and off a different type of operation. So what I'm going to do first is the easy thing. I'm just going to move it over here, right? And so we're going to use by the cursor point. Okay, now what that means is when I pick cursor point as my method, it's pretty much like the move tool. I'm just going to snap here to the corner of my parcel there, left click on it, and then I can pretty much just drag it over here. Now you'll notice that Civil AccuDraw is trying to get into the mix, right? This is one of those things that people who don't understand it get annoyed, and they'll come right up here to this dialog and they'll close the dialog and they'll be like, haha, I turned you off, and it's still there, and they get really frustrated, right? So if you don't want Civil AccuDraw to be active, don't close the dialog there. Come over here to this first icon and turn it off. And now you'll see I don't have that background anymore, okay? A lot of people get frustrated with those two things. They don't understand the ordinance system or the reference element system, and they just come up here and they turn off that dialog, and AccuDraw is still running in the background whether or not that dialog's there. You got to toggle it on and off with that first icon. If you know those two things, you'll love Civil AccuDraw. It'll be your best friend. Now I'm just going to come in here and snap to that cell there. If I wanted to make sure I got the exact point of beginning there, I could use the origin snap, right? That works on cells nicely. And then I'm just going to left click. And that allows us to move those smart elements. Now, again, I know you never pick up a parcel and move it like this, right? But this is a learning experience. We're teaching you how to use this transform tool. Now, for the rotate here, I need to kind of clarify something. A lot of times with the current software, what we're used to seeing when we set the angle is going to be 3 points, right? In this example, you would say, I want to set my active angle, and you'd snap there to the vertice and then to the other leg of that angle, and the software would figure that out. But with the transform tool, they do things a little differently, because remember, we could do a move, a rotate, and a scale all in one go. So these two lines here may not be connected, right? There may not be a point that I can measure. These two vectors may be disjointed. And so the software allows for that, even though in this case we've already made it kind of a 3 points for our angle, right? So what I'm going to be doing is this is going to be my first point, and this will be my second, and then I'll come back and make this the third point, and I'll pick down here in the leg. And what that'll do is that'll give me the two vectors, and it will find out the angle between those, okay? So the way I do that is I click this little icon here, this little like fishnet here, and select it. And again, I'm going to read my prompts. This is point 1. This is going to be point 2. Going to go back for the second vector here, point 1, and I'm just going to pick where we have a PC here, right there. Okay, and that sets up the angle. Now, let's talk about how we're going to rotate it, and that's this about here. Okay, so you can see I've got the accept point. I don't really like that at all. Okay, what that does is I have to make sure that I snap back to that origin point. Okay, now maybe you like that, but I don't. I would rather have either a fixed point, or if you're doing something globally and you want to scale it around, 0,0, you can use the 0 origin. The element center is another one that I don't hardly ever use, if I've ever used it, maybe once or twice in a rare instance, but I either like fixed point or 0 origin here. So I'm going to pick fixed point, and again, we've got that little crosshair icon. So now I can easily click that icon, come down here, snap to my point, and now I've got the rotation point. So I've got my angle and my rotation point fixed. the only thing I need to do now is actually rotate that element. So I'll just left click on it and rotate it there. Again, please don't send any hate mail. I know we would never do it this way. It's just the training material here. Okay, so let me go ahead and clean my mess up here. And the last step of this would be to actually come up here to some of our drawing production tools. And I'm going to select element annotation here. And if you'll recall, I said these elements were intelligent, right? So all I need to do is left click on that element and then reset to tell it I'm done selecting elements. And what you'll see is that annotation pops right into place. Now, the annotation, the style, all that good stuff is totally dependent on your environment. And what I mean by that is you can customize this to look any way you want, okay? So don't be just looking at this and saying, well, that's not how we do, you know, our right-of-way plats. Well, that's, you know, that's fine. You can set it up however you want. One nice thing about this, though, is that it's by the annotation scale. So if I want to use it in a 200 scale drawing, you'll see that that text automatically updates. All right, so you don't have to have 15 different layers or levels for your annotation. You just annotate something once, and whoever is using it picks the scale that's going to be on that sheet, and you're good to go. All right. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to, any questions about that? That was kind of quick, I know, but we've only got an hour here. So that was basically creating a parcel from scratch. What I'd like to do now is I happen to know in this first parcel up here, we've got an issue with it, right? It doesn't close quite right. So what we're going to do is we're going to use another tool. And that's under these edit. Oh, I need to be on the right tab. Geometry. Here we go. And I'm going to pick the modified tab now. And you'll see we have a geometry builder edit. Okay, so if you remember the first time around, we picked geometry builder. This right next door is geometry builder edit. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and left click on that. You'll see it's the same basic dialog, but nothing's happening yet until I come over here and I select an element. Once I left click on that element, it pulls it in, and now you can see that information. Now remember I said, you know, you can change how the software interrogates that element. So I'm going to go to begin point here, and now you'll see we've got a closure error. Okay. Another way to see that is we can run a report on it. Now we've got two different checks here. We've got a map check and a geometry. Okay, a map check is kind of is like a parcel check or something. So I'm going to click that, run that report, and there you can see the map check report. And there you can see where we're busting, you know, by a considerable amount. So what we find out is that when we were entering this this data here, as we go through it, this number right here, 189.5, should be 189.71. Okay, so we just made an error typing things in. That happens, right? So how do I fix that? Well, you simply come up here and select it and change whatever you need to change, right? This is like a live field here. So I'm going to do 71 and hit enter. And when I do that, you'll see that that closure then looks pretty good. If I want to run that report again for, you know, just archival purposes or whatever, now you can see we've got a good closure. We also have acreage, right? Square foot and acreage here. So again, there's a lot of information in this report. If you haven't seen reports in ORD, just real quick, you can pick different style sheets to like run that data through, and you can see you can get some different reports off of that. So if you need to push that out to another program or something like that, you can see that. Now these are with style sheets. So if you have somebody in the office that's really good with like low grade programming or HTML stuff, they'll probably be able to take one of those and tweak it to your own custom needs. Okay. So we've made our change. We found out what the error was with that parcel. We ran a report on it. Now we need to write it back to the file. But again, before we do this, make sure to make it a smart element, okay? I almost wish this was like in neon or something, right? It'd like flash and say, hey, you know, make things smart, okay? So then all we need to do is come in and modify that element, and it says, hey, I'm going to simplify this, and, you know, I might remove some of the rules. And of course, that's what we want, right? We want to fix our parcel there. Now, I forgot to point this out, but, and let me just move these out of the way here. That's kind of nice too. Even after they've been placed, you can see, you can just pick those up and move them where you need to. But you can see that that distance there has been updated, 189.71 now. Okay. All right. We've got one more thing to do over here, and this time we're going to take a dumb element, and what I mean by a dumb element is something that was just drawn with like smart line. Okay, not that it's, you know, anything personal, but there is no intelligence on this element. If I come up here and I select it, you can see it's just a shape, right? It doesn't know what those bearings and distances are. However, somebody took the time and drew it correctly, okay? So what we're going to do then is pull this into that very same tool. So the Geometry Builder Edit, and this time I'm going to select this shape here and select it. Now, really, all we need to do is take this and promote it up to Smart Elements, because if you look, like I said, it was drawn correctly, right? We've got a good closure there. Now, this is something that, again, kind of trips up some people, is that they don't realize that this little icon right here means that it's basically a graphic element, okay? The surveyors, they see this icon when they're editing their chains, but on the engineering side, you don't hardly ever see this icon. But what this means is that this is just a graphical element. Well, I don't want that, right? I want a smart element. So the first thing I'm going to do is turn that off. And look what happened. As soon as I turn that one off, the ruler pops up. Okay, and now I can select the ruler. So again, something, you know, I don't know why the ruler isn't grayed out or something like that, but it can be a little confusing. That might be another enhancement request I put in. So you always want to look for that ruler there, okay, or the yardstick, I tend to call it. I was always told in school, you know, you had a scale. You didn't have a ruler. Rulers were in England, right? You had a scale. So I got to call that thing a yardstick or something. Once I'm done with that, all I need to do is go ahead and modify that. Okay, and you look at that and you're like, well, okay, Tim, nothing changed. You know, what's the big deal? Well, nothing changed, but look at that. Now when I select on it, it knows that it's smart, right? It knows what its bearing and distances are. The only thing we need to do is kind of help it out a little bit here, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select it, and then I'm going to bump my mouse. And what that does is it brings up the context-sensitive menu, and this is really where you do 90% of your work, probably in ORD. So you would select the element selection tool, you left-click on the element, and you bump your mouse there a little bit, and that menu pops up. And this is different for each element, right? If this is alignment, it would have different icons that show up. If it's a terrain model, it would be different still. But almost everyone has this first one, the properties. So I'm going to select the properties here. And you can see the problem. We've got a feature definition here and a feature name, but we don't have anything defined, right? So I'm going to come in here first of all, and I'm going to change that feature definition back over to right away. If you'll remember, we picked the property line. And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to change its name. And this is just going to be parcel 7. Okay. So I make those 2 quick changes. You can see now that we have that orange dash line like everybody else. So again, you relate to elements based on their feature definition. Not, I mean, level, color, weight, it's all still there in the background, but now the feature definition really drives that. If I tell this that it's an existing property line, it's going to make the changes to the element, you know, the correct level, the style, and all that good stuff for me. I don't have to worry about that. If I hover over this now, you can see it's parcel 7. Okay. Now what I can do is go ahead and annotate it just like I did with that other element there. And now you see the bearings and distances for that. Let me go ahead. I heard a couple of
You're getting people that are going to send you Christmas cards is some of the comments you're getting.
okay.
No.
I heard the chirping in there. I wasn't sure what was going on, so I had to go to my other monitor there.
Yeah, basically, add or hip if you want to chime in anything or any questions based on what you saw. That's fine.
Yeah. Go ahead and throw them out there. We'd be happy to field those. All right. So now let's do something that we all do, like a temporary easement or permanent taking or something like that. So we're going to go back to our tools, and I'm going to show you one more thing that's really, really awesome about Civil AccuDraw. You can actually customize it yourself. Now, what you have to do is you first have to turn it on. Okay, so again, that's that first icon. Don't forget that this is how you turn it on and off. Don't just click that tool there. Once I have AccuDraw active, I can come over to this second tab here, and I can go down to my favorites. Now, if you look at the favorites list here and look at my menu, you can see it's a one-to-one relationship, right? So here I've got bearing and distance. Same thing here, distance and direction, right? Is my distance and direction unlinked? So that means you're taking your distance from one and your direction from another element, okay? Distance. Okay, so hopefully you get the idea here. This is basically allowing me to customize that menu. Now, what I want to set up is a brand new tool, and I want to do it from offset. So I'm going to click this add button here. I'm going to give it a name. Okay, offset. And then I get to pick what I'm playing with, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is going to be an offset, and the second is going to be an offset. Okay, so I tailor it just like the tool that I named, right? Offset. Obviously, those can't have a common origin, right? Wouldn't do you any good to have the same offset twice, so it's going to default to a no there. You can pick this icon, okay, off of a drop-down list here, but I'm just going to leave it with the one that it threw out by default. It looks like, I don't know, one of those like little origami swans, right? To me, it's supposed to be two different alignments with the offset, but I'm going to call that a bird. So I'm going to go ahead and close this dialog now. And what I have to do is just cycle Civil AccuDraw. So I turn it off, I turn it back on, and boom, there's my new tool, right? So how cool is that you can make your own tool that quickly? So again, what we're going to do is we're going to set those iron pins up, right? So the first thing we're going to do is set up our Civil AccuDraw, get that ready to go, and then we're going to go back to the geometry tools and play pick point again. And I'm going to use this pick point, but all you Kogo fans out there, if you come down here and you locate point, and you come over here to your method, this ought to alleviate a bunch of your fears, right? So we've got a traverse method to locate. We've got points of intersection, points on a curve. You've got all sorts of different methods, right? So again, it's not that we've taken away Kogo tools. It's just that they might be a different way, or, you know, a different way of looking at it. Instead of like placing a pin by offset, you know, you pick the place point tool and then you let Civil AccuDraw help you out with the precision input there. All right, so I'm going to set up my point. Again, I'm not going to deal with elevation or rotation. I don't care about that at this point. And I'm going to, everything resides on this feature definition here. So I'm going to put iron pin set, right away pin set. And first thing I'm going to do is type in the name IPS1. Now, this is another enhancement request. You'll see here in a second why this kind of gets me into trouble. But we've got a name there of iron pin 1, or iron pin set 1. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this up. And the idea is I want from the baseline here, I want to go 200 foot up, but then I want the point to be on my property line, okay? So again, we go back to the big O, right? That first offset is still working off of something, right? It looks like it's actually working off of my parcel there. So I'm going to change that. I'm going to hit O, and I'm going to say that first offset should be my alignment. So I left click on that. And if you'll remember right, I said this was going to be 200. Okay. Now, AccuDraw lets you get away with something there. You'll notice I just typed 200, but my cursor was on this side of the alignment, right? So it actually said, you know, you said 200, but what I'm guessing you meant was minus 200. And that can confuse people. I call this cursor discipline, right? You have to have some cursor discipline. If I come over here and type in 200 now, oh, yeah, see, it's locked into that negative. But anyhow, that you got to kind of pay attention to where your cursor's at, because sometimes it'll change the signage on you, and you got to be aware of that. Now I'm down in my other field here, and all I need to do is hit that O again on my keyboard. Remember, ordinate. And then now I've got an offset off of both of those two elements, right? So this, if you remember, should be 0. And that's going to place that point 200 foot off my main line, right on my property line. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to left click and accept that. And you can see that little triangle in there. Now, one thing I typically do, especially with survey, this comes up a lot, is because a lot of these, excuse me, a lot of these cells are dynamic, I go ahead and I bump things up, right? That makes the text kind of ugly, but now I can see my cells a little better. And you can always scale them back down, right? So it's not like a permanent transformation, but boy, does that make things, you know, selecting things a little easier, right? So I always tell my survey crews, you know, or my group that, you know, go ahead and bump that scale up so you can grab stuff easier. You know, it doesn't matter. You know, let the software make things easier for you. All right, so now the next point that I'm going to locate is going to be by a station offset. Now, the only change I have to do is I got to come back to this and type in IPS2. Okay, and like I said, that would be an enhancement request, because you always, after every point, you got to come back here and change the name. Okay, now this time it's by a station offset. So I'm just going to come up here to Civil AccuDraw and change my mode. And now you can see I've got station offset. Okay. So I'm going to key in 530 plus 00, and that's a minus 160 offset, and that locates my point. Okay. All I need to do then is left click to accept it. And then for the third point, what I want you to, or what I'm going to do here is just go ahead and set it again by an offset. And I'm going to come over here. Hold on, let me bump my numbers on my PDF. Okay, so now this one has an offset of minus 160. And again, we want it to be right there on the property line, right? So I'm going to hit O. Oh, I didn't want to hit O, gosh darn it. Let me hit the reset there. I wanted to hit the tab button to go to that second offset. And now I'm going to hit 0. And I hit O again. Gosh darn it. Okay, let me try this one more time. 0. All right. Well, third time's a charm, right? So now I've got a point that is 160 foot off the main line, right? At an offset of 0. So it's on my property line. All I need to do then is left click to accept it. All right, I'm done with Civil AccuDraw for the moment, so I'll turn it off, right? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to play connect the dots, and I'm going to do that with our smart geometry tools. So I'm going to come back here to the lines. Now, before I do that, I need to set my feature definition. And that's one of the reasons why I really like this dialog, okay? You get it under standards. It's called the feature definition toolbar. And if you've ever taken a class with me, I pretty much, you know, specify I like everybody to dock this. Make it part of your environment, because it's feature definitions are so powerful, and this dialog deals with those. So we definitely want to run that when we can. So then I'm just going to come up here to right away and select proposed right away, and I'm going to play connect the dots. Now this time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start over here at my origin snap, and I'm going to snap to that cell. And I'm going to actually set my origin snap. And then I'm just going to play connect the dots, right? Now, OpenRoads Designer does have this chain tool. I personally don't like it, but that's just a personal thing. I'm not saying don't ever use it. I'm just saying it confuses me sometimes. So let me snap to the corner of my parcel here real quick. And it's just not my preferred way. What did we do there? Did we get our line? No, we didn't. Let me undo is a great thing, right? Let me go back and snap there. Go back to my key point snap here. All right, and then I'm just going to come home back to the point of beginning. All right, so now what I've got is a bunch of lines here, and they're intelligent, right? If I come up here and I select that line, you can see that it's got those numbers there. But this goes even further, right? This is one of, I think, is the most amazing things about OpenRoads Designer. Let's say you come back and you need to modify that iron pin there, right? You can select it. Look, I left click on that cell. You can see the offset at -160 and 530 for the station, right? Well, maybe that's 530 plus 50, right? If I move the point, look what happened to the line work. Because the line work is snapped to my iron pin, if I move my pin, it's going to follow it, right? Maybe instead of -160, it's -200. Okay. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, right? With our offsets, our intelligent points, we come over here and you see it's 160 and 0. Well, guess what? If I break that out to -250, it's going to follow that property line up. So it finds the point that's 250 off the main line at the property line and automatically modifies it. And notice how that line is following it. Because when I place the line, I snapped to those cells. And when you do that, you set up a relationship. You can see those little icons there. And so that's one of the powers of this software, is that you build off of elements. Now, that does mean you have to be careful, right? I mean, you got to make sure you know what relationships you're setting up. And sometimes it's not a good day on intern day, right? You get somebody in the office who doesn't quite understand what's going on. They can cause some pretty significant damage, right? So, but that's why we have backups. So training.
And we're running in the last 5 minutes, just so you're aware.
All right, let me just wrap this up then. I'll come up here, and what I want to get to is we're going to take this geometry and we're going to complex it. Now, I could complex this from any point, but if you think about it, it would make sense to come off of our point of beginning here, right? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select that. And you can see it accidentally grabbed my parcel there. So I'm going to hit the reset button. I don't want to do that. What I'm going to do then instead is I'm going to turn off the level for those parcels. And what I did there is I just right click and held, turn off by element, and that will allow me to turn off that level. I'll go back and I'll try this again, and that looks good. So I'm going to accept that. And now here's the coup de grace. Let me go ahead and go back to the home tab real quick. I'll go to levels. I'll just turn that back on real fast. And I'm going to come up here to the geometry tools, and I'm going to run a legal report. So I'm going to locate my first element. That's the proposed taking that I just picked, right? I'm going to give it its parent, the primary reference. Bandwidth is just how far out we go for station offset, and then reset. Now, this is where it gets really awesome, right? You can see we've got basically a legal description of both our points, right? Or both our elements. So there's our proposed right of way. I should have probably called that something different. I wasn't paying attention. There's my parcel 8. But here's where it gets really interesting. You can see we've got that report. We get a little verbose as we start talking down. And oh, you know what? When I placed that third point, I forgot to call it iron pin 3. But look at this. It says from my ported beginning, parcel 8 to iron pin 1, iron pin 2. See, so when you set up these relationships, it automatically matters. So names matter when you're building stuff. Relationships, names, they really do help you out later on in the project. And so there you go. Pretty cool stuff. All right, we've got a minute for questions.
Well, people can hang if they need to, but
Yeah, sure.
I just need to make sure. Any, you can unmute if you have a question or raise your hand or whatever you want to do. I get
Yeah.
very, very nice.
So again, this is part of the right-of-way training that is out there in the Bentley Learn server. There is a few things, like I said, that are quirky, like moving that parcel. And when we create the existing right-of-way, we have a taper on a curve, which is another thing nobody ever does in right-of-way. So those two things are kind of quirky. If you can overlook that and just get the training out of it, you'll go a long way. But it's a good course. I do like it.
We do appreciate it. And thanks everyone for coming. And could you put the link to the training in the message? I can send it. I mean, it's hard to get to everybody. I think we had 28 or 29 people in this session. So
I will grab that really quick for you.
So if you want that, hang in there for a second and we'll have Tim stick that in the message box for you, and I'll try to steal it from there and propagate it.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think it's very helpful. I'm ready to go out and do a closure right away. So
good to hear. I like, honestly, I like, once you understand the new tools, they do everything we used to do, but now when you have to go back and make changes, things are a lot easier than than redoing everything from scratch. Let's see. I think it may be under the geometry course here. Yeah, right-of-way fundamentals. So I'll select this path here. You just come down to number 5. That's the geometry, and you'll see that. So I'm going to hit that in the chat window for everyone. And
it's kind of nice that it actually locks the content due to the fact that when you get CAD drafters and just MicroStation wanting to go grab graphics that the surveyors put in.
Yes.
You don't want to just go in and screw this stuff.
Right. Like I said, it's super, it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's really powerful, but you do have to kind of know what you're doing, because
the drive doesn't fit in the right of way, so I'll just move the line.
Right.
Okay. Well, thank you, Tim. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Any comments from anyone besides all the verbal ones that came in?
This was one of the best presentations I think we've had in a while. I think Kathy put that in there as well.
So good job, Tim.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Yep. Try the veal, right?
Yeah. And I did capture the attendance list from the point. So I had not done that. That makes it handier to be able to grab it off the interface. So thank you all. And we'll look forward.
A question about the classes too. Oh. And yeah, if you get with your Bentley rep, we do classes. And
actually, so, if they can also go into the Bentley educate. If you go into the portal, you can actually search on the classes, and where he has classes, there's a place that you can search for online classes.
Yep, that's true.
And then we have online classes of different ones that are available at different times. So and tons and tons of pre-recorded ones, so you can just do it whenever you want to do it. Because oftentimes you have somebody gives you a job you need to finish tomorrow, so you have to figure out how you can educate yourself quickly.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much.
All right.
Good job. Jumpstart your knowledge.